So almost all of my clients, now that they're in their 30s and 40s, are struggling with their belly and love handles. And invariably, I'd hear them say things like, I need to do more cardio to burn more fat. Whilst this holds some truth, we need to understand how we can optimize body composition so that we're holding on to less fat but more muscle. And with that, we're feeling stronger and leaner than ever. That's always the goal. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how fat loss happens and make the case that we might have got it wrong in thinking that cardio is the best exercise modality for losing fat. I'm hopefully going to convince you that resistance training is the most superior tool for optimizing your body composition. So one, how does weight loss happen? Very simply, energy stored equals energy in minus energy out. So losing weight requires us to take in less energy than we expend. Now ultimately, this is what governs how much weight as stored energy we lose. So if you consume less calories than you expend, you will lose weight. It's that simple. So just something to bear in mind here, because we want to optimize body composition, we want to lose as much fat as possible and little to no muscle. So not just weight, we want to lose fat. But I do want to repeat that weight and weight loss will happen by simply getting into a calorie deficit. This does mean that you can lose weight without doing any exercise, but from a health perspective, I would always advise that you definitely do some form of physical activity. Let's talk about energy expenditure. So energy expenditure is basically the amount of calories you burn. This is important to consider for the rest of what I'm going to talk about in this video. So here's what accounts for our energy expenditure. Number one, basal metabolic rate, or BMR. This is basically where you do nothing, and it's also referred to as coma calories. And it accounts for about 60 to 80% of our energy expenditure. So believe it or not, doing nothing burns the most calories. Two, thermic effect of feeding. This is basically the energy used whilst digesting food. Proteins have the highest thermic response, whereas fats have the lowest. So there's a case for eating more protein. And this accounts for around about 10% of our total daily energy expended. Three, exercise. If you're sedentary, this accounts for 10 to 15% of your daily energy expenditure, whereas for highly physically active people, it can be 30% or more. And non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT. This is basically all the movement that you do during the day when you're not exercising. In sedentary individuals, NEAT can account for 6 to 10% of our energy expenditure, whereas for active individuals, it can account for over 50% of our energy expenditure. You can increase NEAT by making your daily lifestyle more active, which is something that I help my clients with. So for example, you could park your car further away from where you work or take the stairs instead of the lift. And NEAT can also increase if your body becomes inefficient and burns more energy per movement. And I'm going to talk about this more later. So what type of exercise is best? As we can see, exercise can account for very little of our energy expenditure, but we are interested in losing the belly and love handles and getting much leaner. So we want to use our energy expenditure to stimulate muscle to stay or even to grow. This will mean that when we lose weight, we are not losing muscle mass, but mainly fat mass, which in turn will lead to a favourable body composition. One thing I notice from my clients and people I've spoken to is that we're too concerned with what we burn in just a single bout of exercise. So, for example, in an hour of cardio, you may burn 600 calories, but in an hour of lifting, you may burn 150 calories. But we need to look at the energy we consume outside of exercise sessions. So now that we know what they are and what components of our metabolism there are, can we increase BMR and can we increase NEAT? Yes, we can. Lifting will help you to build and preserve muscle mass so that your BMR stays high, but it will also increase NEAT. Here's a couple of recent studies of note. This study found that we can lose 1.5% of our body fat through resistance training alone. And the study reference is actually a meta-analysis which pulls the results from a large number of studies, in this case 58 of them. The population of interest in this study was healthy adults. The most recent study on this topic was another meta-analysis from the Obesity Journal, which included 116 journals. Given their findings, they found that considering the similar effect on fat and weight loss and unique effect on lean mass, resistance training rather than aerobic exercise, cardio, alone should be considered within any multi-component fat loss prescription for individuals with overweight/obesity. So, should I ditch cardio? For the reasons outlined, I do prefer resistance training and do prioritize it as a means for fat loss. But that isn't to say cardio is ineffective. Studies do show that when combined, you will lose more fat. So if you currently do cardio and enjoy doing cardio, by all means do continue, particularly if you're already on a progressive resistance training program, which is very important. Should we rule out cardio as a means to increase lean mass? Well, this is interesting. I came across this study which found that aerobic exercise can lead to muscle growth. However, this is usually the case for individuals who are untrained or middle-aged, and the type of aerobic exercise must also be considered. So in this case, some of the findings suggest it had to be pretty intense and frequent, which in my view isn't sustainable for the long term. So in the context of obese individuals, the goal is to lose as much fat as possible. Cardio seemingly helps them to lose much more fat, so it may be beneficial in these circumstances, and given their training experience, it may even help them to build muscle mass. Practically speaking, with obese individuals being less mobile, resistance training using weights may prove to be slightly difficult at the start, so moving without load, i.e. aerobic training, may well be a better option. But this meta-analysis, which we've already referenced, found that resistance-based exercise programs combined with caloric restriction were the most effective for reducing body fat percentage and whole body fat mass in participants who are overweight or obese. In summary, most of the guys I'm training are guys in their 30s and 40s who are just looking to get rid of the belly and love handles, and they're not too old and they're typically not obese, and they already move relatively well compared to the populations I've referenced. So this being the case, I would prioritize resistance training first and foremost. Prioritizing cardio can reduce our capacity to burn more calories by causing us to move less, and may cause some reduction in muscle mass, particularly if your diet isn't on point, which will also reduce our energy expenditure long term, which isn't what we want. But I don't want to rule it out completely. All movement is good, and if doing some form of cardio allows you to get to the habit of moving and you find it enjoyable, I encourage you to do so, because I want to make a case that it's not necessary or the best way to lose fat and to keep it off, which in my experience runs counter to what most people think. So prioritizing lifting, as studies show, will cause us to lose weight but also build muscle mass, and this will help us to increase NEAT outside of sessions, which will in turn help us to lose fat and optimize our body composition. So if you want to get rid of the belly and love handles and you're wondering what exercise you should be doing, prioritize resistance training. Combine it with cardio if you want, although it's not typically necessary, and make sure you get your diet right. If you make sure both of the above are something that you can commit to for the long term, you're onto a winner. And not only will you lose the belly and love handles, most importantly, you will keep them off for good. Hopefully you found that in some way illuminating. If you've got any questions, please do hit me up in the comments, or you can reach out to me directly, and I'll see you in the next video.